from 8.
The Radio Wammo Breakfast.
Let's turn to the night sky. Dylan Storey is going to help us do it. What is going on out there, particularly with Satin? Hello, Dylan.
Hello.
Of course, thanks very much to the Auckland Saturn Observatory. Yes, so Saturn not in the same orbit at the moment. What's going on?
Yeah, it's in the same orbit. Don't worry.
Oh, right. Okay, don't panic. Okay.
But if you've been watching it in the night sky, if you've been following these talks and watching Saturn or just watching it, it has been moving in an east to west direction for the last must be about a month or two, and it's been getting closer and closer to a star. And about a week ago, it got very close to the star, almost sort of it was in the same place. Then it sort of stopped for a few weeks and stayed pretty much stationary. Now, if you watch it, it's moving the other way.
Yeah.
It's getting further away from the star, moving back west to east, where it's going to continue its movement for the next year or so.
Now, this is not entirely unexpected now, though, is it, Dylan?
No, it wasn't a big surprise. It was a big surprise to the ancients who looked at these things and they thought, how these things, everything's going around the Earth, and yet there are these 5 visible lights that will stop moving and turn around and go the other way for a little while, and then go back on their path. And that, they didn't really have a model. They came up with all sorts of complicated models for things that could be swinging on pendulums as they went around the Earth. But it wasn't until Copernicus came along and said that, hey, what if everything's actually orbiting the Earth orbiting the sun instead of orbiting the Earth? That would make sense, and that would explain this. And everyone said, no.
Yeah.
And then about 100 years later, Galileo came along, and he was the first person to use a telescope to look at the sky, and he saw several things which reinforced this theory and gave him more evidence to support it. And he was a mathematician, and he said, what if everything's orbiting the sun? And the church said, no, we can't have that because that disagrees with us, and you're under arrest. But he knew he was right, and we certainly do today.
What happened to old Galileo after the arrest? Was he released?
No, he spent the rest of his life under house arrest. So he retracted his statement to some extent, so that he wouldn't get his head chopped off.
Yeah.
And he continued his work, but he was kind of restricted to being within the building. They wouldn't let him leave. They didn't want him to spread this message around.
Because they probably secretly knew he was right? And they wanted to keep on with the research.
Knew that he could be onto something, because it did actually make sense. So what happens is Earth is going round, Saturn's going around outside us. Earth, because it's close to the sun, the gravity's stronger, it's moving faster. When it gets up to a certain point, it actually overtakes Saturn. So when it's sort of travelling, it's crossing Saturn in the inside lane, if you like. From our perspective, it makes it look like Saturn's going backwards. And this happens with Mars and Jupiter as well. It makes it look like we're going backwards because we're actually overtaking. So it's called retrograde motion of the planets.
Right. So that happens yearly, yeah?
That happens yearly, yeah. As Earth will pass Saturn roughly once a year. Mars less often, because Mars is moving faster itself, so it takes a little while longer. It takes about 1.5 years for Earth to catch up to Mars.
Right.
Each cycle.
Well, I can imagine. So for the ancients, that would have been enormously confusing.
Yeah, it would have been, yeah. How could these things...
Particularly when it wasn't always happening on a certain date.
Yeah. When you had to sort of work out this complex equation to see when it would happen. But no, the retrograde motion happens every year or so. And it's particularly noticeable with Saturn at the moment because it is close to that star. It's one of the stars of Virgo, so you can... Every night when you can see it, it would have been very noticeable a couple of weeks ago, these two star-looking objects right next to each other in the sky.
Yeah.
And they're almost directly north after it gets dark and quite high in the sky, maybe about 45 degrees up in the sky, so very easily noticeable. And Saturn, of course, has got the yellow colour, so easy to pick out. And if you watch it over the next few weeks, you will see it visibly getting further away from that star.
Yeah.
So this is a kind of practical astronomy that is sort of easy to do and is good to get people hooked onto star watching.
Yeah, definitely.
Star watching.
A star of a completely different kind, an asteroid, passed pretty close to Earth just in the last week or so.
On Monday, 12,000 kilometres, which is, that's only a few Earth radii. That's a pretty scary close call. It was never going to hit, according to calculations, but...
When did they find this one?
Only a few days before it came by. Yeah.
That was the only warning we had?
Yeah, size of a small bus.
And what would it have been like if it had entered our atmosphere?
There was one article I was reading that said it would have broken up in the atmosphere and given us an amazing meteorite storm. It possibly large chunks. If they landed, if any large chunks stayed intact and landed on a city, it would be a small disaster. I don't know, just at a guess, I would say it would probably be destroying a city block kind of thing.
Wow. Okay.
Particularly large chunk landed in the ocean, it could cause some sort of tsunami.
Yeah. Well, that would have been exciting.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be a species extinction event, but it could have caused a lot of trouble for people on Earth.
So we don't know how many of those sort of sized objects are out there, and the only warning we get is a couple of days beforehand.
That's right, yeah. We are getting sort of better all the time at detecting these things, so hopefully our early warning system will get a lot better. But because if things are coming from deep space, if they're coming from the direction of the sun, they're hard to see, or if they're coming off the plane of the ecliptic, off the plane of the solar system, they're much harder to spot because there's not as many eyes looking in that direction. But
we still don't have a Bruce Willis type team to go and sort it out either, do we?
Not at all. Not at all. No. If only Bruce was 30 years younger.
Yeah.
But we don't even have the technology to get anything out there to do anything about it at this stage. There's a lot of ideas bandied about for in the future. If we had 10 years warning, I reckon we'd come up with something.
Yeah, we'd have to. All right.
Yeah.
Well, go and see near-Earth objects over at the Auckland Saturn Observatory. No, probably not. But you will be able to see planets and stars and all kinds of things.
We'll be able to see Saturn.
Yeah, doing its retrograde. It's in retrograde, yes?
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's just coming out of retrograde, so
Okay.
It's been in retrograde the last couple of weeks.
All right. Cool. Thanks.
And it's resuming its normal journey.
All right. And you can continue your stargazing with Dylan Storey, perhaps on Twitter as well. Share some planetary stories over the weekend. Twitter.com/Dylan Storey. And as I say, go along to the Auckland Stardome Observatory. Thanks very much, Dylan. See you next week.
Thank you, Wammo. Yep, see you next week.
12 minutes away.